Hotel and welcome. Comedic legacy today. Comedic legacy today. Life, health, and strength to you all. Comedic legacy today. Hotel. Comedic legacy today.
Welcome to Comedic Legacy Today, your weekly journal of ancient African, ancient Kemetic history and spirituality. My name is Anika Daniels Osaze, also known as Unfraka Ma'at.
And my name is Jabari Osaze, also known as Heru Jedin Ma'at Atenra. Today we're in location in Meidum, Egypt, focusing on that great Unsubit or pharaoh known as Sneferu. Today's episode will be entitled Ancestral Paradigms of Excellence. Who is Sneferu? You may note that right behind us you're seeing the incredible pyramid or Merkut that was built for Huni and completed by his son Sneferu. Today we're going to look at Sneferu's 3 Merkuti, for he is the ruler that does not give up, that continues to work to develop the first true Merkut. And so with that, let's look at the great ruler, Sneferu. I'm here in the corbelled chamber of the pyramid of Meidum. You may remember that the actual Nebank was not actually placed in here. But keep in mind that this wonderful corbelled chamber would have been created to hold the body of King Huni. But this was completed by his son, Sneferu. This is certainly a magnificent experience. Take a look at the chamber behind me.
now you just witnessed Jabari entering the Meidum pyramid in Egypt. We actually spent about 2.5 weeks over in Egypt, including Cairo, Luxor, Aswan, Abu Simbel. And I know from my experience going into the tombs, it tends to be very hot and very little room to even get in. What was the experience like?
Well, this was the first time that we'd actually gone to this area, Meidum. I'd been reading about it for a long time, particularly because, as I think I say in the video that we have from our trip, Sneferu was my favorite Nsubit, my favorite pharaoh. And so to be able to follow in his footsteps a little bit was really exciting. So I have to say that I probably would have felt warm even if I was in air conditioning, because it was that much of a powerful experience for me. But you'll note that there's a really large kind of obtrusive air conditioning pipe that goes down along the side of the same tunnel that you have to go into to get to the tomb chamber, the burial chamber. So it wasn't really that hot. In addition to that, because it's not actually towards the Giza Plateau, which is where the three main, most popular and most perfect Merkuti are. Those are well traveled, and so there are lots of people there when you go. You can be going down into the second Merkut and have literally maybe 200 other people coming out and going in at the same time. So it's really crowded there. When we went to see these three Merkuti, or pyramids, that Sneferu built, there was almost no one there. You know, when I went into the Meidum pyramid, I think that there were probably 2 people going in at the same time, just 2 of us. And so it really wasn't hot at all. The difference in going into this particular Merkut, though, is you actually have to climb up a long ladder, sort of staircase, wooden staircase on the outside of the Merkut, and then you go into the deep recesses of the Merkut itself. So it's I guess for most people they would consider it an aerobic exercise kind of experience. So climbing up and then going in was a lot. You felt it when you came out. I know my legs felt a little rubbery after coming out, but it was an interesting experience. And as you saw in the video, we took you real time. We took you real time. You actually saw me entering and going all the way down into the Merkut. So you get a sense of how deep you have to go in to be able to get to the tomb chamber. So,
now, why do you think not as many people go to visit this one as they do the Great Merkut, or the main 3 pyramids that people are familiar with?
Well, this particular Merkut began to crumble in antiquity, and so it's an unusual looking structure now. The original pyramid or a Merkut-like shape is gone. So I think that's one reason why it's not as popular. But then it's also, you have to keep in mind that the Giza Plateau, where the 3 main Merkuti are, is right near Cairo. And Cairo is one of the most populated, crowded cities in the world. So when most people come into Egypt, they come into Cairo airport. So keep in mind that it's not only are these 3 great wonders the most popular pyramids in the world, but in addition to that, they're close to where most people come into Egypt. So when you have to go all the way to Meidum or to Dahshur to see these other 3, it's a little bit more off the beaten path. You'll note that there aren't even that many villages nearby when you go.
Now, Sneferu is also significant for you as well, because he was the father of Khufu, who made the Great Pyramid.
Yes. I think that the thing that I think is interesting when you look at all these different Merkuti, we have the opportunity to go from mastabas, or the original stone-cut, rock-cut tombs that were shaped sort of in this rectangular building that tapers at the top. We go from that structure right into visiting Saqqara and going to see the step Merkut that Zoser has built by the great African multi-genius Imhotep. And so that's the first pyramid in the world. And so from there, then you go into his successor is Huni. So Zoser's successor is Huni. And then after Huni, you get Sneferu. Huni attempts to build a pyramid. He dies before it's complete, and his son or stepson, Sneferu, completes that Merkut. And so you're really beginning to see not only sort of generation upon generation of rulers do these amazing monuments. But in addition to that, you're seeing the scientific method at use in ancient Africa as well, and I think that that's also interesting. So, yes, as you look at these Merkuti and you begin to put Sneferu in context, then you begin to look at the great pyramids on the Giza Plateau, and they're in a whole different context now.
Now, you also had an opportunity to go into, what was it, the Tombs of the Nobles?
Yes.
And I know that was a grueling experience for you.
Most people said to me that going into the Meidum Merkut was going to be difficult. And honestly, I didn't feel that it was as difficult as going into the second pyramid on the Giza Plateau, which was built by Khafre, because that particular pyramid, actually, it's a little shorter. So you're really crouching down into a space that's about 4.5 feet tall, and you're walking the equivalent of a half city block, crouched down. And so that's difficult. When you go into the Meidum pyramid, it's not as short. So while it's long and you're walking for a long period, it's not as short. So for me, it wasn't as difficult. And so I remember coming out and saying, oh, that wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. And then I said, well, I'm going to go into the mastaba nearby that is for this unknown noble. And I thought it was going to be simple. And the thing that I thought was amusing is that one of the Arabic guides that was there didn't speak much English and said to me, walk like baby. And I remember saying, walk like baby? What exactly does that mean? What does it mean, walk like baby? I had no idea what he was trying to say to me. It wasn't until I got in and began to realize that you really had to crouch down. I mean, I probably had to crouch into a space less than 4 feet high. And I'm nearly 6 feet tall. And so when you think about that, walking, I think 100 meters, that distance was very difficult. And it got narrower and narrower to the point where I actually considered, folks, and thankfully I didn't do this, so you actually see that you still got some footage, but I actually considered putting down the camera and returning and just saying, look, this is too narrow, because there was no one else there. At that point, usually when you're going into the Merkuti, there are other people going in with you, so you don't feel like you can get lost, you don't know where you're going. In this mastaba, I was walking in this really small space, and it seemed like it was getting smaller, and I had no idea what to expect. It was a point where I had to turn off the camera and literally get on my knees and squeeze myself through this space. If I was a larger guy, I think I wouldn't have been able to get through it. It was that challenging.
Wow.
And then after that, you walk across this area. It looks almost like a plank, and you get into a very large, actually, tomb room that still has the nebank, or which has been misnamed sarcophagus. You get in there and you get to see this beautiful granite nebank that's there, and it's large, it's massive, and that's a really interesting experience. But then I know that while I was there and taking footage, all I could think was, I have to go back. That was really difficult. How am I going to go back? I took some images of the space I climbed through, but what I should have done was take some images of me in the space, so you can really get a sense of how small this hole is. You're literally, it's almost like going through an inner tube, a tube, like if you're trying to squeeze through a tire. Some obstacle courses have that kind of thing. That's what it was like. It was very, very challenging getting in there.
Now, did it have the same kind of air-conditioned ducts you mentioned?
I don't think there was
other
any air conditioning in this particular mastaba.
Okay.
It was underground, and so it tends to be a little cooler. And it was only myself and a Japanese tourist that had gone there. I've been told that, first of all, African-American tourists almost never get to see these three wonderful Merkuti. They just never go. Sometimes you may have some Asian tourists and some German tourists. But other than that, there's no one there. There's no one there. So it wasn't as hot because there weren't as many people in there, but it certainly was. It was challenging. It really was challenging. You'll see that I intended to film, and so intending to film, I wore clothes that I would film in. I didn't wear jeans and a T-shirt or whatever. And yes, Jabari does sometimes wear jeans and a T-shirt, for some of you who never see me dressed that way.
Very rarely.
But after crawling on my belly in sand, I remember thinking, now why did I wear this outfit again?
Trying to profile.
And it was just for you at home. So it was really difficult. It was very, very difficult to get into it and experience that.
Great. Well, now, we are in the process of planning our own tour.
Yes.
To Egypt. So hopefully, viewers at home, if you're interested in going with us, definitely drop us a line, send us an email at info@centerformaat.com, or even on our Facebook page, let us know that you're interested, that you'd love to travel with us. We're planning on going to a lot of these sites, especially Cairo and Luxor, Aswan, and definitely Abu Simbel, which the ancients used to call Ramesses M. Akhet, which is where the Temple of Ramses II, or Usa Ma'at Ra Setepen Ra, was.
We love that. Continually say it. It's so powerful.
Yeah, and his mate, Nefertari.
That's
they
right.
both have their temples there. So we'll be exploring all of those areas. We plan on doing cruises down the Nile, or what we call the Hapi. So definitely let us know if you'd like to join us.
That's right. That's right. We're probably going to be doing that sometime in August of 2011. So for those of you who are watching this, you should definitely let us know if you're interested in traveling, because these experiences, I think that everyone in the world, everyone, should go to see these great, wondrous monuments at least once in their life, particularly people of African descent, because we've been so maligned over these last few centuries. I mean, we've really had it as difficult as any group on the planet has ever had it. And so to be able to see what we're capable of, in lieu of all the things we've been through, I think is critically important.
Of course.
And so definitely, if you haven't been, or even if you have been and you want to be able to go back and experience this from people who actually are Kemetic spirituality practitioners, that's another part of it that might be interesting to you as well.
Of course. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us about your adventure?
Well, next, obviously, we'll go into the second. Well, we're not able to go into, I should say, but we'll be looking at the second Merkut that Sneferu builds, the bent Merkut.
Okay.
And so you'll get to see the bent pyramid. It's actually not open to visitors. So when you see it, you'll see the outside of the Merkut, and we'll talk a little about it. But that all leads to the grand finale when we get to go into the world's first true Merkut. The red pyramid is what it's known now, the red Merkut. And so...
and now both of these were in Dahshur.
Right, right. The first Merkut is in Meidum, an area called Meidum today. But the next two Merkuti are in an area called Dahshur. And so I'm sure that you'll enjoy our visit to seeing the three great Merkuti by the great ruler Sneferu.
Great.
This is a very curious Merkut, particularly because you'll note it has 1 degree of inclination and then rapidly shifts to another. We believe that Sneferu intended this to be the world's first true Merkut. But then, of course, when he got halfway, something changed. And the inclination changes from 55 degrees all the way to 43 degrees. There are 2 theories as to why this took place. The first one is that while it was being built, the great king Sneferu passed. And so they needed to complete the Merkut quickly in order to have it ready for his passing into the afterlife. Now this particular theory doesn't seem to hold as much water because it would have taken almost as much time and almost as much effort to build it at the 43 degree inclination as opposed to the 55 degree inclination where it starts. The second theory, for me, seems to make more sense. And that second theory is that they started building this wondrous Merkut, and they began to realize that it was unstable. Perhaps the corners that you're looking at here began to show signs of fissuring. And as it showed signs of fissuring, what actually was beginning to happen were very clear signs that this would be unstable. And so instead of leaving it unfinished, because our ancestors did everything they could in excellence, they decided that what they would do is they would change the angle to use less quarried stone, because they intended to build the final great Merkut, which is now called the Red Pyramid, which we'll be at in a few moments. And so as they changed the inclination, they used less quarried stone, because it was very difficult for them to get quarried stone. They were certainly able to do it, and they would take it from large distances, but using less quarried stone would have saved them much of the work that they could have actually put towards the third Merkut that he builds. And so, as you look at this Merkut, one of the other things that you'll note is that it is one of the few Merkuti in Egypt, in Kemet, that still have much of its limestone casing. Look at the beautiful flat limestone casing. Imagine it would have been polished highly, and that it would have truly been magnificent to approach from any area around it. You probably would have had to shield your eyes in the midday sun. Now, Sneferu, as I've told you, is my favorite Nsubit, probably because of his sheer determination to get to his final point. So, as you saw before, he starts with the Merkut that is now known as the Meidum pyramid, or Meidum Merkut. That one doesn't work properly. And so he comes here and begins to build this incredible bent Merkut. And he realizes that he probably didn't excavate completely, and that there was still sand underneath. And you know that sand shifts. And so with the shifting sand, it began to crumble. And then he finally moves on to the great Red Merkut, the world's first true Merkut. A beautiful, beautiful endeavor. It's called now the Red Merkut simply because the stones, the beautiful Torah limestone casing, has been removed by the Arabs when they got here to build Old Cairo. And as they removed these huge blocks of limestone, they actually noted that the granite underneath looked red in the evenings. And so you've seen this great ruler build 3 separate Merkuti. How wondrous was Sneferu? How wondrous were our ancestors? the stairs, which are carved in limestone. And then finally, you go up this area that has this wooden handrail. And you continue to ascend up until you go into the entrance into the Red Miracle. And so once you get to the top, your legs are already beat. But then you descend even further down into the center of the miracle. From there, I find it's very interesting that you find 3 corbelled rooms, not just one. In that room, which is a magnificently large room, it must be at least maybe 30 feet high, maybe even more. It's a very, very large area where you could imagine that possibly the Neb Ankh of Sneferu and possibly other containers that would have seen him all the way into the afterlife would have been held in those rooms. And I just think it was a magnificent place to be. Unfortunately, on the inside, you'll note that some of the conquerors, some of those Europeans and others who had come into this area to destroy what we had actually, well, maybe not, I shouldn't say destroy, but to certainly show their dominance over these great monuments that we carved in antiquity, you'll be able to see that they've burnt their names into the middle, into the walls of the Mirkut. And I think it's such great sacrilege to do that. You may even note that someone in 2010 wrote their name in there, which means that there's not enough security or not enough staff on the inside to ensure that that is still not taking place. Folks, this is one of the most magnificent Mirkuti that you'll ever see. The world's first true Mirkut. And I think that it's a shame that it is still being desecrated to this day in 2010. I have to make sure that I don't let those feelings overcome me, because I do believe that it was a wonderful experience to be able to get into the greatest Mirkut ever done by one of my favorite rulers, Sneferu. So with that, why don't you take another few looks at this beautiful Mirkut, known today as the Red Mirkut by Sneferu.
Well, thank you for sharing that experience with our viewers at home. You know, if you have any questions, definitely let us know. You can always email us again at info@centerformaat.com. Visit our website at www.kemeticlegacy.com. Or you can always come to our Facebook page and let us know what you think. Or if you'd like to join us on our next journey to Kemet so that you'd be able to visit these extraordinary monuments on your own, then let us know. We can add you to our list and make sure that you get all of the information as soon as possible.
Absolutely. We know that there are a lot of you out there who are watching. We walk down the street and we see you occasionally. Even folks that we know or have known in sort of past lives will see something on a show and then ask us more information. And we're just like, wow, I guess they're watching. We didn't even know that they were watching. But we know that there are tons of you out there who have caught on to this wonderful ride that we call Kemetic Legacy today. And so if you really want to be able to, as they say in the hood, be down, you really should let us know that you're watching.
You went there.
Yes, I did. So that you're able to join us on the tours that we do here in the local area, and even the tours that we'll be doing in Africa and in Egypt, and have an opportunity to actually see these monuments yourself. Now, you may notice that even though going into the Mirkuti was difficult, you didn't see booby traps. There were no snakes. There were no, all these things are Hollywood creations. And I think that they were created in many ways by people who are very ignorant of what these monuments were like. And they actually have kept many of us away from seeing some of the greatest wonders in the world. So while getting into them sometimes is arduous and something that on another level you should even wonder, well, are we actually supposed to be in there?
Yeah.
It's a long conversation we've had, and perhaps in another episode we'll talk more about it. But you should know that visiting these spaces and being in the room where your ancestors believe that they'd be able to enter into eternity is an interesting experience. It really is an interesting experience. So we hope that you'll follow along with us, not simply on television, but also in person as well.
Okay. Twa'u, as we always say, the divine voice in us greets the divine force in you. Anku Jasaneb, life, strength, and health. Hetepu.
Now, was I correct or not in telling you this is going to be one of the most magnificent things you'd ever seen?
Correct.
Take a look at these wonderful images of Ramesses the Great. You are seeing 4 statues at over 60 feet high. Most of us may not even live in buildings that are 60 feet high. Absolutely magnificent. And if you look at Ramesses the Great, you're seeing him look out towards the horizon. This is generally called his temple at Abu Simbel. Now, I told you earlier that I didn't actually agree with us calling this site Abu Simbel. And you might wonder, well, why? Our tickets say Abu Simbel, our itineraries say Abu Simbel. What actually happened in the history of the rediscovery of this site is that once again, our friend Belzoni, now who remembers Belzoni? Who remembers that name Belzoni?
Temple robber, was it?
He was a temple robber.
Yeah.
But you may remember that when you went into the temple, when you went into the Mirkut, the second Mirkut,
He put his name
on the Great Giza Plateau, when you got into the tomb chamber, his name was emblazoned on the inside of it. And it said 1818 or something to that effect. And so when he comes to this area to find this temple, quite a bit of it was covered with sand. And so he spends a lot of time digging it out so they can get in. And as he does this, his team that's working with him seems to have someone who was very, very small. We believe that he was a dwarf. So he looks at the dwarf and he thinks it's amusing to see this magnificently large structure being worked on by a man who was a dwarf. And he says, "What's your name?" And the guy says, "Guess what? What's his name?" Abu Simbel. And so he says, "We're going to name this after you." And so that's how you got this name, Abu Simbel. I actually think that this is another instance where Belzoni and European researchers, I guess you could, it's even hard to treasure, he was really a treasure hunter. European treasure hunters show great disregard for our great sacred sites. This temple was called something like Ramesses on the horizon, or Ramesses Enaket. And you know that the concept of the horizon was very important to our people. So it's also in the name of that thing that they've renamed the Sphinx. And so obviously the sun is important to us. Our Kemetic ancestors believed, as we now truly understand, that the sun sustains all of life on the planet. And so it has divine qualities. And so to consider being on the horizon means getting the first divine rays of the sun. Now, once again, as we talk about the importance of the sun, some of you that are with me in the Nubian Museum might have remembered that I talked about the divine baboons you'd see on the top. Does anyone see the divine baboons? You see them? All across the top. Do you see them?
Oh, yeah.
They greet the temple before anyone else. They greet the temple. And remember, I said that the baboon was sacred to the sun for what reason? Someone tell me why. What did that noise sound like?
Which made the roosters second place.
It was even before. That's right. It made the roosters second place. This is before the roosters do it, and so they recognize that the baboon was sacred to the sun in that symbolism. And so that's why you'll see them at the top of the temple. Now, for many of you, this may look very different, but keep in mind that you're still seeing ancient Kemetic temple architecture at play. When we looked at those great temples, what did we see in the front? Someone tell me, what was the name of the structure we saw in the front? The pylon is the Greek name. And the Kemetic name was, does anyone remember? The Sebket. Now remember, the Sebket was masked in a very interesting way, right? There was one large one on one side and another one on the other side, and then the entrance was in the middle, right? Take another look at this temple. Aren't we seeing something very similar? And so while we're seeing divine creativity and innovation in design, you're still seeing the basic structure. You have two statues on one side, two on the other, and in the middle is what?
Entrance.
Now keep in mind that when you look at the symbol for Akhet, what do you see in the middle of that symbol? Ra. And who is above the door here?
Ra.
Ra. So while you're seeing innovation and creativity in design, you're still seeing the same spiritual symbolism at play. Now, Ramesses the Great was one of the greatest, most prolific builders in all of Kemet. He built all throughout the region, including all the way down here on really which was in an area that would have been considered Nubia. So this is sort of his Nubian temple, and you'll also be able to see the temple that he built for his great wife, Nefertari, on the other side. Anika will be talking to us about the temple of Nefertari. And this temple was built over quite a period of time and was built to such precise measurements that something miraculous called the Miracle of Light today took place on February 22nd and October 22nd. Does anyone know what that Miracle of Light was? Yes, young man. On 2 days a year, thank you very much for that answer. On 2 days a year, a shaft of light comes through the middle of the temple and shines all the way to the back into the Holy of Holies. Now, the Holy of Holies is generally something that would probably close, because remember, who were the folks that would only be allowed into the Holy of Holies?
Oh, Europeans.
No, not the Europeans. I'm talking about when the Kemites were using it, when our ancestors were using it.
Just ordinary people.
Ordinary people wouldn't be able to go in usually. Who would be able to go in?
Priest.
And not even just any priest. Usually it was the high priest, the Insubit, or Pharaoh, as you may know, and some individuals that they may have decided would be able to assist them. And so on these days, they would definitely have the doors open, because this shaft of light would come right through the middle of the temple, only for about 15 minutes, and it would illuminate 3 of 4 statues. 3 of 4 statues in the Holy of Holies. Now you might ask, what's the 4th statue that doesn't get illuminated? This is a statue of Ptah. Ptah is a creation deity that is considered to work in darkness because he's fashioning the world. And so this was done so precisely that only 3 of 4 would be illuminated. So it didn't just have incredible architectural ability, but can you imagine the astronomical calculations that would have had to be made to do those? Now, my understanding is that most people said that those 2 days in which this miracle light took place happened on Ramesses II's coronation day and his birthday. There's some disagreement as to whether that is actually correct, but keep in mind the precision that had to be done for that to take place. Now, you may know that this is not the original location of the temple. The temple was about 20 meters down the hill. But when the Egyptian government decided that they were going to try to dam the great river Hapi, that is generally called the Nile today, I think inappropriately, but when they decided they were going to dam it to create this huge man-made lake known as Lake Nasser, they realized they were going to flood a large area of what was considered Nubia. And so some of these temples had to be rescued. And it was an international collaboration that took place over the course of a decade. Folks from all countries all over the world sending their best architects and engineers to dismantle this temple block by block and replace it. And so during that time, this happens during the 70s. This is within many of our lifetimes. It was completed when I was a little boy. So this is within many of our lives. Some of you are like, well, you're really old, so you know. But this was completed during our lifetime. And they used technology that had not been seen on the planet ever before. So you figure, well, you know, with their high technology and their computers and their ability to do very precise measurements of the planets and the heavens, they should be able to put it back in exactly the same place, correct? So the miracle of life took place on the same days. They thought they'd be able to, but they were not. And so once again, this is a testimony to the fact that our advanced sciences were so advanced that they've probably far outstripped some of our understandings even today. It's the same way that individuals have attempted to create the Great Mirkut unsuccessfully over the decades. The last attempt, I believe, was done by a Japanese group, and they got about halfway and they were saying this is going to be a wonderful, wonderful accomplishment for Japan. And then after they made the announcement, the whole thing imploded. To this day, we are unable to duplicate what your ancestors did in great sacredness. And so keep in mind that as you retrace the footsteps of your ancestors, you are going to come upon the most divine creation, the most divine genius that the world has ever seen. And that's the reason why we have to take this great sojourn to this land, because we have to understand what we're capable of. And as we begin to awaken and begin to mature as a people and begin to recognize what we are capable of, that's the only way we're going to be able to return to the great heights that African people faced during a large swath of human history. Now, when we think about the last 400 years, it's been rough for us, right? Come on now, rescue if I'm wrong. It's been rough for us, right?
Yeah.
It's been really hard these last 400 years. Think about the fact that Kemetic history lasts for over 3,000 years. As I've gone through history with you on our trip, there's sometimes I just leave 400, 500, 600 years out. That's how long our history is. And our ancestors wanted us to understand that. This blip in human history that has been the most difficult blip for this particular group of people can be overcome. It can be overcome. And we can once again be the most powerful people on the planet, as long as we recognize the blueprint that our ancestors have laid for us. With that, what I'd like for us to do is have an opportunity to look at the interior of the temple. One of the things that you'll note, I'm going to come to you in 1 second, one of the things that you'll note is you'll see some wonderful images of Ramesses II in Assyrian pose. Asar being the image of the first ruler of Kemet, that person that goes forth to create the afterlife for us as his son and his wife reclaim his name. We've talked about Asar quite a bit on this trip, and you'll see him in Assyrian pose. Sahufied, I'm not going to say mummified, Sahufied. And those are going to be magnificently large statues in the middle of the temple. And as you go in, you will once again be able to see the Holy of Holies now. Now, as you look on the right side of the temple, you'll even see a commemoration of Ramesses' perhaps his greatest military triumph, the battle at Kadesh with the Hittites. And this battle, Ramesses is actually cleaved away from his army, and it's possible that there's only a small number of people around him, and he's fighting himself. You know, today when you have a ruler, they essentially are calling the general and calling folks, you know, do this, do that, do this, do that. In the days of Kemet, the Insubit was out there himself on horseback, or on a chariot, or fighting himself. And so this commemorates his great valor and military strategy during that period. And it leads to what becomes the world's first peace treaty. And so the Hittites and the Kamites come together and have the world's first peace treaty in recorded history. And it comes to Kemet on this beautifully rendered silver tablet that we hear mentioned during Kemetic history. You'll see that in here as well. Are we ready to head in? Wonderful. Questions? Yes. Yes.
Are those the three statues that are illuminated?
No. You'll see them. They're inside. They're seated, similar to this. And I think they're seated in meditative pose. Look at his image. This is a meditative pose. Yes, once again in that pose of divine position. I mean, they're able to receive power to their right brain, the intuitive side of their brain. For those of you who have not heard yet, Anika's going to be doing a lecture today at 5:30. She's going to talk considerably about the differences between the right brain and the left brain. And so I'm sure that you'll find a lot of information about this during this lecture as well. Any other questions? I saw another hand. Yes. There are images of children and also his great wife next to his feet. And so you'll see that all these images really are about the grandeur of Ramesses, but also about the grandeur of his family. And so all these things you'll take note of when you look at Kemetic architecture. And when you get over there, you're going to see something very interesting. Very interesting. Because here, Ramesses is depicted in huge form. But when you get over there, you're going to find something very, very interesting about the size and position of the form in reference to male to female. Brother Chica.
Is that his head and crown right there on the ground?
Good comment. The second statue of Ramesses was damaged during an earthquake in antiquity. And so when they moved this structure up the hill, they decided that because that was how they found it in antiquity, they would leave it that way. So they actually moved those pieces up the hill and laid it the way they found it. So yes, that's the second beautiful statue of Ramesses that's on the floor. All right, folks. Yes. Europeans didn't do that. They didn't do that. They didn't do that. Are you ready to go in?
Yeah.
In addition to that, on the sides, take a look at the folks, once again, from the 9 peoples that Ramesses had to subdue in order to be control of the region. And also take a look at an interesting way that he's written his name. It's not spelled out. Usur, Ma'at, Ra, Setepen, Ra. Say that name with me, by the way. Usur, Ma'at, Ra, Setep, and Ra. Our ancestors believed that in order for them to live into eternity, their names had to continue to be spoken. And so I believe that we need to continue to say these names, not the ones that the Greeks have given them or the ones that Europeans continue to want to use, even though they know their original names. And so let's continue to say the names of our ancestors, because as they stand forward in this great hall of Ma'atir, what we consider heaven today, they can only provide us strength in our endeavor. And so with their continued existence goes our continued success. With that, let's head in and see this magnificent temple.